So, if you've been following global geopolitics at all, I mean, the images from late 2025 were they were impossible to ignore.
Oh, absolutely.
You had Russian President Vladimir Putin's very visible visit to India
Right. And this wasn't just some ceremonial visit. This was about cementing a really dramatic strengthening of cooperation.
and across everything, right? We're
Yeah.
talking defense, energy, trade.
And advanced technology.
Yeah.
It was a carefully choreographed signal to the rest of the world. And that signal, well, that's what makes this moment so critically important.
Yeah.
We've gathered sources from all over the Western media, Reuters, The Guardian, the FT, AP News, The Washington Post, and they all seem to agree on one thing.
What's that?
This deepening relationship isn't just a bilateral issue. It's really the core of a major global economic debate right now.
So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack that, to get into the central, the high-stakes trade-off that India is making. On one hand, New Delhi is prioritizing what it calls strategic autonomy, the right to act independently. But that independence seems to be coming directly at the expense of its deep, and I mean crucial, integration with the Western financial and technology system.
It's the ultimate geoeconomic tightrope walk. You've got India trading these short-term, very measurable strategic benefits for what all our sources identify as long-term structural risks.
So you can't really have that level of independence without Washington and Brussels starting to calculate the economic consequences.
Exactly. And we need to look at both sides of that ledger for you.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the immediate, tangible benefits that are clearly driving this decision, even with all this Western pressure pushing back. What's the immediate payoff that makes this risk worth taking?
Well, the primary payoff is really twofold. It's guaranteed stability and significant cost savings in two absolutely essential sectors, energy and defense.
Not luxuries. We're talking about national survival and budgeting here.
Precisely.
Right. And Reuters was very explicit about this. They highlighted that Russia is actively boosting its energy and defense exports to India.
And this is happening at the exact moment the U.S. and Europe are trying to tighten sanctions against Moscow.
So for India, this means immediate, assured access to vital military and energy supplies. No questions asked.
And we really can't overlook the financial part of that energy deal. I mean, India's massive reliance on heavily discounted Russian crude has been a spectacular short-term financial win.
You mean it's helped them manage their domestic economy?
It's helped them manage domestic inflation, stabilize their economy through a period of, really high global energy volatility. We're talking billions of dollars saved in import costs.
It's fantastic for the current budget, I get that, but it's a strategy that has to have a known expiration date.
Well, exactly. The Financial Times was quick to call this out. They framed the whole discounted oil thing as a short-term gain that's already anticipating a long-term trust deficit with the U.S. and the EU.
So they're basically financing today by cashing in their diplomatic chips for tomorrow.
That's a great way to put it. They're leveraging future diplomatic capital.
Yeah.
But, it is more than just the discounted oil. It's the systematic commitment to a structural realignment. The commitment announced by Modi and Putin to push trade volume to a massive $100 billion by 2030.
Which AP News reported on.
Right. That's a huge statement of intent.
Yeah.
It suggests they aren't just dealing in isolated transactions. They're trying to build an alternative commercial reality.
And to enable trade of that size, you have to find a way around the U.S. dollar, which is, still the global reserve currency.
Exactly. And that's where the most consequential financial move comes in. The creation and expansion of the rupee-ruble settlement mechanism
An explicit effort to bypass dollar-based settlement.
to protect both nations from potential U.S. Treasury action.
And that is where the temperature in Washington instantly rises. I think AP News quoted U.S. officials viewing this whole non-dollar payment structure as a systemic threat. Can you elaborate on that? Why is a rupee-ruble mechanism seen as so fundamentally threatening?
Well, it's not just about swapping one currency for another. The real threat lies in the precedent it sets.
And the volume involved, I imagine.
And the volume. If a major, rapidly growing global economy like India can reliably transact $100 billion a year using non-dollar mechanisms, it basically gives other developing nations a blueprint for de-dollarization.
And the U.S. financial system relies on the dollar as a geopolitical weapon.
It is the weapon. The weapon is sanctions. So by creating this bypass, India and Russia are, in effect, building an immune system against that weapon.
That's a crucial distinction. We are moving beyond simple politics and into the actual mechanics of financial power. But if the goal is to build an alternative system, what are the immediate risks?
Right.
That brings us to the other side of the ledger, the escalating financial and market costs that Western analysts are flagging.
And the first and maybe the most politically charged risk is just the message New Delhi is sending.
The optics.
The optics. The Guardian noted that New Delhi's open embrace of Putin, especially now, sends this clear signal of strategic autonomy. But that prompts Western partners, too.
The primary markets for India's exports.
The primary markets and source of its capital, yeah. It prompts them to fundamentally reconsider their trade and technology relationship with India.
Okay, so how does that reconsideration translate into concrete economic pain? Is it just a strongly worded letter, or are we talking actual financial penalties?
Oh, we are talking actual penalties. It starts with market access barriers. So India's increased oil imports, regardless of how great they are for the budget right now, are moving on to the U.S. and EU scrutiny list.
And that's not just bureaucratic jargon.
Yeah, it's a pre-sanctioned designation.
So what does being under that kind of heightened scrutiny mean for the thousands of Indian companies that rely on global trade, not just the oil firms?
It means exposure to future secondary sanctions. That's according to the analysis from Reuters.
Yeah.
And secondary sanctions are the biggest hammer the U.S. has.
Right.
They don't target Russia. They target any third-party firm, bank, or insurer anywhere in the world that continues to deal with sanctioned Russian entities.
So let's play out a scenario. A mid-sized Indian chemical manufacturer. They use an Indian bank that, maybe without them even knowing, processed one of these rupee-ruble transactions for, I don't know, a refinery. What happens to that manufacturer?
Their access to the U.S. dollar system could be cut off. Potentially, instantly.
Wow.
I mean, just like that. Their ability to get trade finance, to receive payments from clients in the U.S. or Europe,
Gone.
it just evaporates.
Yeah.
That one event could ruin a globally reliant firm just because of its proximity to this Russian transaction ecosystem.
And on a macro level, I assume this political discomfort could lead to retaliatory tariffs or other trade barriers on Indian exports?
Weakening the whole Made in India growth story.
Yeah.
That is a direct blow to their export-driven economic strategy. But the risk doesn't stop there.
It goes deeper into the financial system.
It permeates the financial system.
Yeah.
Specifically dollar flow and banking confidence.
The Financial Times was worried about this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The FT voiced deep concerns that this continued reliance on Russian crude creates long-term structural reliability questions for foreign investors. Questions about India's financial stability and its compliance standards.
That sounds like a sentiment problem, but how does sentiment translate into tangible damage to, say, the Indian rupee?
It hits foreign institutional investment, FII. These are the colossal global funds, pension funds, mutual funds that pour billions into the Indian stock and bond markets.
Okay.
If those investors even smell systemic sanctions risk, or if they see the cost of compliance going up, they start pulling their money out.
And that FII outflow creates immediate, significant selling pressure on the rupee.
Which increases inflation risks and raises the cost of borrowing for the entire country.
And AP News documented that the banking scrutiny is already getting tighter.
It is. The move toward non-dollar mechanisms makes U.S. banks nervous. So they're increasing due diligence on Indian banks, on refiners, on oil marketing companies.
Which is basically a bureaucratic tax on every single dollar transaction.
It is. It means massive new compliance burdens for Indian banks. More paperwork, more delays for payments, hiring huge legal teams just to prove they are not circumventing sanctions.
So it makes the whole dollar-based process for India slower, more expensive, and less reliable.
And that's regardless of whether the transaction has anything to do with Russia or not. It's a systemic friction on the movement of global capital into the Indian economy.
That paints a very clear picture of the financial squeeze. But let's pivot now to the area where the consequences could be, well, most crippling for India's long-term future, the high-tech corridor.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this targets India's grandest economic ambitions.
Technology is the absolute bedrock of India's vision for the future. The ambition to become a global manufacturing hub, especially in areas like chips, and a digital superpower.
And that vision depends almost entirely on high-tech transfer and capital from the West.
Specifically from the U.S.
The Washington Post had that report, which added this almost spy thriller layer to it. It detailed how a former deep-cover Russian operative is now leading Moscow's efforts to draw India into advanced tech cooperation.
And that's sent immediate alarms through Western intelligence agencies. They view this as a direct, organized attempt to compromise and undermine the crucial U.S.-India tech alliance.
An alliance built on trust.
On trust and a shared vision of democratic technological development. So the direct economic impact is that U.S. tech export rules, which control the flow of sensitive goods, will likely tighten dramatically.
In response to this perceived security breach.
Exactly.
So let's talk specifics. What sectors are most vulnerable if U.S. export control shifts from, say, ally status to risk status?
Well, we're looking at the three areas India is betting its future on. First, semiconductors chips, which are the foundation of all modern manufacturing.
Right.
Second, artificial intelligence development. And third, advanced defense avionics, which India needs to modernize its military.
So if the U.S. restricts access to high-end design software or advanced manufacturing tools or specific IP in those fields,
then India's own national programs, like the Make in India initiatives focused on chips, are immediately jeopardized.
it sounds like the U.S. has the power to basically halt the momentum of India's entire technological renaissance.
It does. And the long-term consequences go beyond just sales restrictions. The primary impact is on capital and research flow.
Meaning what exactly?
This tightening environment leads to slowing foreign direct investment, especially in high-tech manufacturing, because multinationals don't want their facilities in a jurisdiction that's deemed a sanctions or an espionage risk.
And the research and development side?
That's arguably even worse. Reduced high-tech transfers mean India can't get the cutting-edge tools it needs, and decreased multinational R&D investments mean the smartest, highest-paying tech jobs that India covets. They just get moved to more secure jurisdictions.
So the big tech companies will just pack up their labs and leave.
They'll prioritize protecting their intellectual property and avoiding any hint of sanctions exposure. If there's a perceived high-tech corridor between India and Russia, they're gone.
That connects a geopolitical decision directly back to the job market and future economic growth for the average Indian citizen. It's not just about diplomacy anymore.
Precisely. It becomes a domestic reality. And this is why the sources are treating this as a major structural debate, not just some diplomatic spat.
So let's synthesize this. We have these concrete, immediate strategic and financial stability gains from Russia, contrasting directly with these deep structural and very long-term risks coming from the West.
It means India is walking a dangerous tightrope.
Yeah.
The analysis we reviewed is clear that this is increasingly viewed in Western capitals as a zero-sum calculation.
It's one or the other, strategic autonomy versus deep global economic integration.
You can't have both, it seems.
So if we weigh the scales, you have, what, the guaranteed discounted resources and assured defense supply from Russia?
Right.
Contrasting sharply with 5 major challenges from the West: the threat of U.S. tariffs, general export market risk, FII outflow, destabilizing the rupee, tightened financial scrutiny on banks, and the disruption of that crucial high-tech corridor.
And India's declared stance that strategic autonomy is greater than Western approval. Well, that means the country is knowingly accepting these potential long-term consequences.
As the unavoidable cost of political independence.
Exactly. And the sources conclude that this choice doesn't just result in, temporary political discomfort. It imposes long-term structural economic risks that will impact India's growth trajectory for years to come.
So this deep dive has really shown us that the price of political independence in this fractured global order is often measured in banking compliance costs and restricted chip access.
It's not as abstract as it sounds.
No. To recap, India gets a guaranteed defense and energy supply from Russia, which stabilizes its immediate security and economy. But in exchange, it threatens its access to dollar-based trade, it invites secondary sanctions on its key firms, and it risks destabilizing the critical U.S.-India high-tech corridor.
They are replacing established, rules-based global economic corridors with a partnership based on immediate geopolitical necessity. It's a profound gamble with their economic future.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. If strategic autonomy means deliberately choosing to bypass established global financial and technology corridors, what precedent does this choice set for other major developing economies, like Brazil, Indonesia, or South Africa, who are also trying to balance their rapid growth with their political independence in this rapidly fracturing world? What model is India providing for the next decade of geoeconomics?